Hi, I'm Wegener and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. Last week I was editing images for my A7R6 and 100-400 review, and I had this image of a tern. Decent capture, great action, super crisp, but the ocean looked completely flat and grey. I almost didn't use it, but then I tried something that took about 2 seconds and totally transformed the image. Let me show you. I opened the image in Camera Raw, but you can do exactly the same in Lightroom as well. Navigated to the masking panel, and in there I selected the background. After that I scrolled down within the mask to the white balance slider and pulled it slightly towards the left, making the background more blue. And just like that, the dull, boring grey ocean becomes a beautiful, vibrant blue color. Now don't go too hard on this though, because even a few clicks can already have a big impact and we don't want to overdo it. Now from here we can tweak the image a little bit more, like removing some of the debris on the beach, brightening it overall, maybe adding a curve and a bit more vibrance. But the heavy lifting had already been done with literally just 2 clicks. And this is exactly the kind of editing that I love and also teach in my Photoshop and Lightroom masterclasses. Fast techniques, instant impact. And if you want to learn more about it, they're both linked for you down there in the description. So whenever you're dealing with grey skies or boring water in your shots, try out this trick, it's a real game changer. Let's talk about Canon's biggest announcement from last week, one that actually affects every single RF shooter, but got buried under the hype from the launches of the R6V and the Sony A7R6. Canon has finally admitted what we've known for years. Their RF lens caps are terrible. I actually made a video about this a while back showing you how to DIY fix these caps so they can fit on in multiple ways and not just one, but this is not needed anymore. Canon just released version 2 of the RF rear caps and apparently they now go on in 3 different ways instead of just one specific way. I've ordered a bunch from my Canon dealer, but it sounds like they won't be available until August. Honestly, I think Canon should just send the new caps to every RF shooter because these old caps were just that bad and annoying to put on the lenses. And hopefully Canon just won't stop with the rear caps, because I think at least the front caps of their teleconverters also need an upgrade so they're much easier to put on. Have these old rear caps been driving you mad as well, or am I the only one? Let me know down there in the comments. Canon also launched the R6V and the 20-50mm power zoom lens last week. The R6V is a creator-focused video camera that comes with the same sensor that we can also find in the Canon R6 Mark III with 33 megapixels, and that can also shoot up to 7K open gate. What I love seeing on the camera is not only IBIS but also the newly designed rear wheel, where you can not only use the wheel but also have 4 pressure points to access more menu items like you can do on a Sony body for instance. Price-wise, the camera sits about $300 below the R6 Mark III at around $2,499 US. For wildlife photographers, the camera is a bit of a non-starter because it comes with no EVF, so lining up your shots or shooting in bright conditions can be very difficult, but I could definitely see this working as a studio camera, because besides a great sensor, the camera also has better active cooling options compared to the R6 Mark III, so overheating even for longer recording times shouldn't be a problem at all. I currently use an R3 to film myself in the studio, including this video, and an R6 Mark III to film myself in the field and doing all the B-roll. And here an R6V could be an interesting alternative in the future. However, the major advantage the R6 III has over the R6V is that it is a better backup camera for photography, so in case one of my main cameras goes down, the R6 III could jump in seamlessly, whereas an R6V would be a lot harder to work with. It's clear that the R6V is trying to be the answer to Sony's very popular creator cameras and also Nikon's ZR, a market that every brand seemingly tries to get into right now. Unfortunately, I got nothing new on the R7 Mark II or the 300-600mm lens. Canon rumors has gone quiet on both of them, and my own sources have told me multiple times that they think the R7 Mark II is not coming this year, and even the 300-600 might only be a slight chance. So while nothing is off the table entirely, chances of the gear coming out very soon are probably relatively slim. Not the news many wildlife shooters were hoping for, but that's where we are. Going by Canon rumors, the next likely release is an R8 Mark II later in the year, possibly in a retro body with the same 33 megapixel also found in the R6 Mark III and likely no IBIS. Canon has also had a busy week on the firmware front, releasing multiple firmwares for many different cameras including the R5 Mark II and the R1. I've updated one of my bodies so far, but I'm always a little bit hesitant to flash them all at once just in case something might be wrong with the firmware, and we've seen in the past that that is a potentially likely scenario to happen. So I often like to take a slower wait and see approach, and when I know it's all working, then fully jump in. Have you updated yours yet? And if so, did you notice any improvements or any issues? Let me know. For wildlife shooters, there's not exactly a lot to get excited about. Maybe slightly improved autofocus and also the option to now assign pre-capture to certain buttons. Although if you have set up your camera like I show you in my setup guides, then you probably don't even need a separate button for pre-capture. And if you need help to set up your camera for maximum performance in the field and get autofocus that nails almost every shot, make sure to check out my Canon, Nikon and Sony setup guides that are linked for you down there in the description. That will help you set up your camera in no time and give you fantastic results. And I'm also working on a setup guide for the A7RVI that will launch when the camera becomes available. It's good to see Canon push out firmware updates that include new features, even though there's one I would have loved to see, oversampled 4K 60 in the R5 Mark II. But it seems like this is something that might never come. Since the launch of the A7RVI last week, there has been a lot of talk about its readout speed. Sony calls the sensor fully stacked, but it's seemingly not the same architecture that we can find in the A1 II, the Z8 or the R1. Those bodies have a DRAM layer sitting directly on the sensor, helping with ultra-fast readout speeds. The A7RVI apparently doesn't, and that combined with the high megapixels cause it to have a relative slow readout of about 18 milliseconds, which certainly can cause rolling shutter issues in certain shooting situations. Here's the thing though, because when I was using it in the field, it wasn't as much of a problem as I expected, and most of my images turned out clean. I had minimal image wobbles, and even bird wings were only slightly distorted. My suspicion is that because I was using 12-bit compressed RAWs, that the readout speed was meaningfully faster than using full RAWs. Simply less data to read of the sensor, and according to Sony, the camera also does more autofocus calculations per second when using compressed RAWs, and you're getting a bigger buffer. And there's some real-world evidence to back that up. My mate Dwight shot his drone with the A7RVI in compressed RAW and his Canon R6 Mark III, and the images looked almost identical. Here's the interesting part. The R6 Mark III has a readout speed of around 13 milliseconds and the images look basically the same. And that tells me that shooting compressed RAWs in 12-bit might actually be the smartest way to use the A7RVI, even though you're giving up a little bit of image quality. If you haven't seen my A7RVI review yet, make sure to watch it after this one and also check out my video featuring the 100-400mm lens and how it compares to many of Sony's other great lenses. Now a quick update on the A7RVI RAW files, because high ISO definitely seemed to be a bit of an issue in my review. Sony has updated their software, so I was able to work a bit more with the RAW files, and I'm happy to report that there's a little bit more sharpness and detail to work with. So was I wrong about the A7RVI? Well, not exactly. My initial findings still stand. There's a noticeable difference between the low ISO files and the high ISO files. But I'm now confident that ISO 6400 will be fully usable once DxO PureRAW and Adobe are fully supporting the files. And even 12800 will still be usable with a good editing workflow, good noise reduction, and favorable conditions. Keep in mind that the body I was using was a pre-production camera, so there's a chance that Sony will still be making some tweaks before the camera will land in your hands. And how I ranked the A7RVI in comparison to the A1 II, the Z8 and the Canon R5 Mark II I will share in a future video very soon. Let's talk about Nikon, because it's been a few turbulent weeks for them. Their 2026 financial results just dropped and the headline number as 86 billion yen net loss sounds alarming, but should we actually worry? The bulk of that loss came from a massive write-down on a manufacturing acquisition that went wrong, essentially a one-time accounting hit. The camera business itself held up reasonably well, even though profit margins took a big hit because of tariffs, rising memory prices, and also discounting in competitive markets. This week there were also rumors that a French company and long-term partner of Nikon actually wants to acquire a controlling ownership in the company. Nikon's stock jumped almost 9% on the news, but it seems like it's just noise, and while EssilorLuxottica, I'm sure I said it wrong, has been acquiring Nikon stock for a long time, they also denied that they want to take a controlling ownership. Japanese companies rarely sell to foreign buyers, and Nikon in the past at least has always called these rumors just a soap opera, so I think there might not be a lot of truth to that. The more interesting question for us though is, what does this financial pressure mean for new cameras and lenses? Nikon is actually increasing the R&D budget in imaging, and it's also pushing hard into the cinema space with their Red acquisition. Overall, this doesn't sound like a company in retreat, but it might explain why we haven't seen a lot of new cameras lately. What I'm personally really waiting for is the Z9 Mark II. Nikon has an amazing lineup of lenses and recently added another great lens to that, the 120-300 f2.8 TC lens. But for all these great lenses, you also need a great camera to match. Now, there's nothing wrong with the current Z8 or Z9, but in a future Z9 Mark II, I would love to see more frames per second in RAW, full RAW pre-capture, and even better autofocus so we can take full advantage of the great lenses. And speaking of Nikon, there might be the opportunity for me to shoot a major sporting event, something I've been wanting to do for a while. That should make for great challenge and fun content, but more on that soon. And on that note, it's a great time to wrap up this week's Early Bird Photo News. A like and subscribe is greatly appreciated and helps the channel more than you think. If you want to take your wildlife photography further, my Canon, Nikon and Sony setup guides are linked in the description, as well as my Lightroom and Photoshop masterclasses. Fast, practical stuff, no fluff. Check these out. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!